Thank you for joining us for our panel on challenges in documenting war crimes in Ukraine. I have a fabulous panel of three extraordinary women, and I'm very much looking forward to listening to what they have to say. So we're going to start with our first speaker. Our first speaker is Professor Hanna Kuczynska, who is an associate professor at the Institute of Law Studies of the Polish Academy of Sciences in Warsaw. She's also an expert at the Polish Supreme Court in the criminal chamber since 2005, as well as the author of numerous publications, including her latest publication, Comparative Analysis of the Trial Model Between Adversarial and Inquisitorial Trial, which was published last year. Professor Kuczynska, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Could I ask for my presentation, please? No? Yes? But could I ask for the first slide? Okay, I'm done. Okay, thank you very much. My presentation will be very practical, because I'm a practitioner. I've been practicing laws for almost 20 years, and I started in the prosecutor's office. And I have a very practical approach to the documentation of crimes committed in Ukraine. And also, my last topic of research was admissibility of evidence. And I was wondering, with all the amounts of documentation of this conflict that's already in the internet, it's amazingly huge amounts of information about evidence in the internet, on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, on personal blogs. It can be used in a criminal investigation, of course, in an investigation of core crimes committed in Ukraine. So I'm going to talk about digital evidence in investigations concerning Russian crimes in Ukraine. And only from this point of view, I'm concerned only about Russian crimes and their documentation, because it seems that it's almost 100% of the databases of digital evidence available in the internet. Let's see if it works. No? No? No. Thank you, but it wasn't me. All right. It seems that the world of crimes of international law is completely different than the world of a normal criminal procedure in ordinary cases. Crimes of international law require large-scale investigations, which have to take into account all the elements that are different from ordinary crimes. The numerous actors involved on different levels of hierarchy, the vast territories on which crimes are committed, also the possibility that territories are under occupation. And we are dealing with this very new phenomenon in criminal trial, that we have too much evidence and not too little. And the key question is how to cope with all the amounts of evidence. And the only answer is in technology. So it's basically not a task for a human being, for a human investigator, or not only for a human investigator, because such investigations right now require high-tech expertise from all the people involved in a criminal trial, from investigators and judges as well. Okay, now I see it's working. And I'm going to talk about the digital evidence, and there is a lot of digital evidence, so I have to narrow the scope. And I will be only talking about open source evidence, also about evidence in social media, but only in the perspective that they are gathered and preserved and managed in digital data banks, in databases organized by various organizations, by various actors. So the in the beginning, we have to see what actors are involved in the process of gathering digital evidence. Not evidence, information about evidence, because it's not evidence. Evidence is in procedural sense, is a piece of evidence gathered in a specific procedure by a procedural authority. So these are not evidence. These are information that can be later used by procedural authorities. So there are state, governmental authorities, where the most significant one is the Ukrainian Office of the Prosecutor General. There is the ICC, and there are various really numerous NGOs that are dealing with this task, and we've heard yesterday about one of them. And such data banks are very precious sources of information about evidence, because they are automatically and in a centralized way, they gather information from the beginning of the conflict, on all the stages of the conflict, about all the places, all the events. And these are not only information about evidence, there are also the archives of a certain conflict, of a certain time in the history. So that's also documentation for the historical purposes. So the first platform I checked was the ICC digital platform, where witnesses can download information about them on a digital formular. There are several questions, and there are regulations of this platform where you should be aware that you are not going to be anonymous for the judges and advocates and the parties. However, it's possible, and you have to ask for it and prove that it's necessary. And basically, you don't become a victim or a witness in a procedural sense. You are just writing that you may be a source of information and later become a witness in the trial and perhaps a victim of a crime if a committing crime is established. The most popular digital data bank was established by the Prosecutor General of Ukraine. It's in English and Polish and Ukrainian and Russian. The formular can be filled in these 4 languages, and there are these four brackets which you fill in, where you give information about yourself, where they can find you, so your address or an email or a phone, if you are moving, if you are a refugee. Where the incident took place, where you, when and where you can just point to a place, and it's automatically saved, like the place of the event. You can also download your photos and videos, and if you have any enemy personal data, you can also point them. But I'm going to talk about NGO data banks, because I think these are most interesting ones, because they don't only gather information about evidence. They do more, because they do also the fact-checking stage. So they gather the information, preserve them, fact-check, verify digitally also, and prepare reports. And I established there are 4 types of such NGO data banks. The most simple one, just gathering information, gathering and verifying digitally the data sources, gathering and verifying digitally and preparing reports. And the last, most advanced NGO would also provide an on-site verification of the data. And the first data bank I found was the Conflict Observatory. It's an American hub that is preparing reports on certain events, not only war crimes. It doesn't say that these are war crimes. These are just crimes or events that were happening in Ukraine. One of such reports presented how the crop storages in Ukraine were destroyed, and the report established that it was intentional crime. So the intent of the perpetrators was exactly to destroy crops, to destroy food, and this way to damage the group, the Ukrainians living in Ukraine. And you see that the report used the satellite imagery, also Google Earth. It used different techniques, and I'm just showing one of the pictures that showed one of the storages. It was established when it was bombed, by whom, by what missiles, and what the damages were. Another report was on population displacement, how the groups of people moved, especially from eastern Ukraine. And in this report, not only satellite imagery was used, but also YouTube footage, personal accounts on social media, documentaries, all the information, all the data that were available in the internet. Another one, and this was supposed to be moving, showed a timeline of Mariupol's destruction, presenting how the population and the buildings was distracted in March 2022. So there was less buildings, less population, and it was verified with the dates of Russian attacks and Russian presence. Russian presence was also checked on satellite pictures where the Russian troops were moving and what vehicles they had. So the report showed how the destruction was done precisely by certain groups, by certain army divisions. And in what time? And that it was something that could be called city-side. So it was a destruction of a city, and the intent was to destroy the city. It was not random damage, but it was the intent to destroy this very city. Another report, that's the last one I found, was the Kiev falling into darkness, and NASA digital tools were used to show how the lights were diminishing throughout all the next attacks that were conducted by Russian forces. And I'm moving very fast through the slides because that's not the point I'm going to make. And here are some tools, digital tools of verification that were used by analysts in this conflict observatory. You see, these are professional tools of digital verification, and it's all available online, so you don't have to apply for experts. You don't really need a very expert IT knowledge to be able to use them. Another NGO that's gathering information about this conflict is a Netherlands-based journalism group called Bellingcat. They are conducting different investigations, journalist investigations, and for instance, basing on this picture, they located the house where the Russian missile programming team works in Moscow, just basing on this picture. Do I have? No, I don't have the specific activities they went through, but they analyzed they did the big picture analysis, small details analysis, and they even found the names of the team. They found that some of them did orders in online applications giving this address in Moscow, or they registered their cars in this place in Moscow, and then they verified this location with satellite imagery, with Google Earth, also with Google Earth as well. Another one, another investigation led by this group was Russia Kremenchuk bombing, where the shopping mall was bombed, and Russian claimed that it was a collateral damage, that was the word I was looking for, because they really aimed in a military object, and it was just the shopping center caught fire because it was too close to the military object, because who was so stupid to put a military object next to a shopping mall. And you see the rocket in the center is a missile caught on a CCTV camera. So city monitoring camera caught the missile hitting exactly the center of the shopping center. And they compared the different images with satellites, with Google Earth, with YouTube and TikTok and Telegram posts. And they proved beyond reasonable doubt that it was a collateral damage, that the missile was precisely hitting, it was aimed at this shopping center. And I collected the list of investigative tools that is available online, where the most popular right now are geolocation techniques, chronolocation, so that shows when the image was taken, shadow analysis, that will be seen later, big picture analysis, micro details analysis, cross-referencing car registration and delivery orders, leaked Russian databases that are also available in the internet. Pictures showed in the Russian state television, although it's propaganda, it can be used in other ways. Personal accounts on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, satellite imaginary, where it's possible to confirm the data with several satellites, city cameras, freeze frames from cameras. That's another database. It's a witness database. Everybody can write down what happened, and that's an example of one of the posts in this database. So witnesses themselves put on what's going on. The Russians were small letter, so I just kept this. Also, Amnesty International verifies military attacks in Ukraine. That's the list of the attacks from the beginning of the war. Ukrainian archive is another one. That was the shadow analysis, where the precise date and time of the attack on public infrastructure in Zhytomyr was investigated and verified. That's a very popular data bank, e-enemy chatbot that puts together a lot of different applications. It's governed by the Prosecutor General right now and by Ukrainian government. In the beginning, it was supposed to help to localize Russian soldiers and Russian army, but right now, all the data collected in this data bank may be used as evidence. The most advanced one, when it comes to IT, is the Eyewitness to Atrocities. Because this application does not only collect photos and videos and statements, but it also manages them and verifies them. So if you download this application, it's easy. We can do it right now. If you download it to your computer, to your phone, and you take a picture, this application stamps it with the precise location and time. And you can record data with the application or download it from your phone. It also connects the photos to the events. So it manages them. So the investigator gets all the data under one label. So this is the bombing of this and this city, and you enter this database, and you have all the evidence on precisely this attack. I have to skip through this because Eyewitness to Atrocities works since 2014. That's the Polish project. I will be very happy to tell you about it more. It's one of the, it's similar to the one presented yesterday, with this exception that it's, I have 2 minutes. With this exception that it is digital, so the witnesses can put down data themselves in a digital databases. And the problems for investigator, that was supposed to be the main topic, because all the data is there. The only task is to how to use it in a criminal trial. And it can't be used like that, just download it and present it in trial, because with all the possible fakes and manipulation of data, all the digital information on the digital data banks needs to be verified, standardized, and managed, because there is too much evidence right now. We have to manage the evidence. So the investigators may use the same digital tools as I was talking about, available online. They can also ask for a forensic analysis, calling an expert on open sources or an IT specialist. I don't know if we have any in Poland. I also asked the Polish prosecutor's office, the national prosecutor who is conducting the investigation, the only investigation into war crimes and the crime of aggression committed in Ukraine. I asked them several times, my requests all got rejected. So I'm not able, nobody is able to tell you anything more concrete on this investigation, because of course we can be Russian spies, but please don't believe that. So I don't know how it's going on in Poland. I'm going to do a research in Ukraine if Ukrainian investigators and courts are using such digital evidence, how they verify that the data was not manipulated or faked. These are specific applications that can be used because the provider can verify the data or the user, so the investigative authorities. These are 4 applications that can be downloaded on a personal equipment and used in order to verify the data. Standardization, I'm going unfortunately to skip through that. The key tool is the Berkeley Protocol on digital open source investigations that serves as a guidance, as a tool of showing what methodology should be used when gathering digital evidence. And the last phase is management, so how to link specific data to a specific event. And the question is, should it be automated or humanly done? Or the investigations in core crimes, should they be automated or human? And you see there is more and more possibilities for the algorithms to gather and verify and manage all the data. And for us, it may seem like Orwell's 1984, but we are talking right now in the doctrine, in the literature, not only about robot judges or robot victims, robot perpetrators, because artificial intelligence may also commit crimes. But we are talking about robot investigators. Perhaps the task of collecting the data should be handed over to algorithms. And I thought also it's a very, very crazy idea, like science fiction. But look what I found on the page of the Office of the ICC Prosecutor. The ICC Prosecutor is committed to introduce new advanced technological tools in order to enrich, filter, and analyze such material. This will include the introduction of artificial intelligence and machine learning tools that will significantly enhance the ability of the OTP investigators to review audio and video evidence. So you see, it's already happening, it's already there. We just don't have any more information because the OTP refused to give any more specific answer to the journalists. I will skip to that. And the last problem, and I'm 1 minute, 2 minutes over the time, the last problem is when we finally get to the court. And we haven't gotten to the court yet in Poland, but there will be, of course, a lot of problems. And my idea is that there should be certain rules of admissibility of digital evidence, because otherwise it will be done like the prosecutors will do what they want to do. And that's not the right way, because right now in Polish procedure there is chaos. Like there is no one standardized way of admitting digital evidence. There is no such conception. They use print screens, which are not digital evidence. They are not evidence at all, because they can be easily faked. And please allow me to tell you one story with extradition to Russia. Because after the war, the escalation of the war, Polish courts started to refuse extradition to Russia. And the task for the Supreme Court, where I work, was to refuse it in a polite way. But it was obvious that it needs to be refused. The courts of lower instances allowed the extradition, but the lawyer, the defense lawyer, was very, very persistent. He fought like a lion for this person. And the court wanted some evidence from Russia that this person was really a terrorist, and this person was Chechenian. And that's enough to be a terrorist in Russia. And guess what? They sent us pictures, 2 pictures of this person smiling with a machine gun in a desert, and next to him was standing somebody with this ISIS cap. And for them, we were supposed to believe that this photo was really taken. And there is such a vast field for manipulation. Like my children could prepare such a photo in a desert of me standing with a machine gun. So the task for the court is to follow certain rules that needs to be established and to assess the credibility and relevance of such evidence in every case before the court decides that it is a piece of evidence, and later in the process of establishing data. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for that. That was really interesting. You don't really think, us people who are on social media, you realise how easily pictures can actually be manipulated. But people who are not tend to not really think about things like that. So standing in the desert with a machine gun would be very interesting. So our next speaker is Professor Kseniya Yurtayeva, who's an associate professor in the Department of Criminal Law and Criminology at Kharkiv National University of Internal Affairs. From 2002 to presently 2003, she's a visiting scholar at Weiser Diplomacy Center, General Ford School of Public Administration at the University of Michigan. She has published over 100 scientific articles on a range of legal subjects, like procedural mechanisms on counteracting cybercrime, amongst many, many others. So I invite you to take the floor.
Yes, it's the second slide of my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much for presenting me, and thank you for Pilecki-Institut for inviting me and hosting us. And yes, my background is criminal law, but one day, waking up in the middle of the war, so we have to realize it, you start to think, what is wrong? What is the nature of this new war? Is it the same like the wars of the previous times, or is it something different? Because today we're talking that we have digital evidence, we have international tribunals, we have a lot of their international provisions, but still we have lots of problems how to prove these crimes committed by the Russian Federation and put their culprits to bring them to court. And being a criminal lawyer, it's brought me a little bit out of my specialty, and I was trying to think about why it's happening, what are the patterns that make it so difficult to bring and prove these crimes. And today the topic of my presentation is engaging the post-truth theory in shadowing the Russian war crimes. Of course, it's not, Ukraine faces very dramatic challenges to this independence and national security today, but I should say that these problems, these challenges didn't happen overnight. It happened starting from 2014, at least 8 years ago, when our independence started become questioned in Donbass region, and when Crimea Republic was brutally annexed. And starting from the time, Ukrainian people live in completely different reality, where our status as an independent nation is being questioned, and we have to prove it every day on international arena and as well on the battlefields today. Okay. Aggressive state, the Russian Federation, in thus far undeclared war against Ukraine, opened a new age of the hybrid war. And as it was explicitly stated and communicated by the Russian military commanders, actually even before the war, this article by Varily Gerasimov was published in 2013, and he was a chief of the General Staff of the Russian Federation, which he is right now as well. A hybrid war engages political, diplomatic, and economic, as well as other non-military measures in combination with the use of military forces for achieving political goals. And it's very revealing that in January of this year, Varely Gerasimov was appointed to a position of the commander of the Combined Forces Group in Ukraine. Novel hybrid tactics introduced by the Russian Federation in the Ukrainian battlefields, both kinetic and virtual, include not only massive engagement of autonomous drones that we all witness, usage of cyber attacks that amount to their use of the kinetic weapons, but also the extensive use of the private military companies that we can see in the example of the Wagner Group, but also the explicit targeting models of qualification of the war crimes committed against Ukrainian people. In this regard, it's quite revealing and remarkable that most of the hostilities committed in the territory of Ukraine are being ignored by the Russian Federation government, but some of them are not only denied, they are publicized and presented as a very notable accomplishment of this so-called special operation in Ukraine. And I would like to just cite a brief example of such instances and their significance to international criminal justice and security system in future. The first example is that in the September of 2002, local occupant powers of the Russian Federation in the Zaporizhia region recorded and publicized several instances of forceful expulsion of, as they called, unreliable Ukrainian citizens from the place of their habitual residence. The head of the Zaporizhia state administration of the occupied power, Yevgeny Balitsky, said that these measures were taken without court proceedings, according to the decree of the occupying power, and he considers such measures very humane. The forced character of the displacement can be determined by their absence of the genuine choice of their victims of their displacement. And their proof of this, that it's a crime, can be, for example, presented by the precedents that were already viewed in their International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in the case prosecutor versus Radovan Karadzic. Despite of the alleged humanitarian character, how it was presented by the Russian occupying power, such actions clearly violate the norm of international law, namely their Article 49 of their Fourth Geneva Convention. According to this document, civilian population can be evacuated only for their security and or for imperative immunity reasons. Therefore, the forceful expulsion of the civilians disagreeing with Russian politics is purely a war crime. Another notable example of this regard is, of course, a forcible relocation of the Ukrainian population to the territory of the Russian Federation. Due to the ongoing war conflict, these numbers are not, we don't know the exact numbers, but I should say I had experience before I joined University of Michigan this summer. I was collaborating with their institution NGO Missing Children Europe, and we were trying to help Ukrainian organizations to see how many children and what are the problems, how to locate them, how many children were relocated to their Russian Federation, and we really couldn't find these numbers, but on the site of their ombudsman of the Russian Federation. So they were publishing these numbers, and actually our ombudsman, Ludmila Denisova, was using the numbers provided by the Russian Federation. So they were available and publicized freely on their, of the officials of the Russian Federation. Among it's worth noting that approximately 2,000 forcibly deported children were orphans and children without parental supervision. In May of 2002, Putin signed a decree for simplified procedure for acquiring a Russian Federation citizenship for Ukrainian orphans and children without parental care. And subsequently, it's opened the back door for fast-track adoption in the Russian Federation with the Ukrainian children. The adoption process of the Russian officials, they changed the names of their Ukrainian children and also their personal information that makes it virtually impossible to find them and locate and bring them back to Ukraine. Although a lot of them still have relatives on the territory of Ukraine, and of course, Ukrainian activists encounter about 400 of such instances. And the most glaring case in such among such adoption that I would specifically note is performed by the high-rank Russian official Maria Lvova-Belova, the Presidential Commissioner for Children's Rights in Russia. She and her husband, who is also an Orthodox Church priest, they adopted a 16-year-old boy from Mariupol. They have already 5 of their biological children and 16 adopted children, and this was another boy whom they adopted. Remarkable that many Ukrainian children are specifically placed in the very religious families in the Russian Federation. According to the 4th Geneva Convention, adoption should never occur during or immediately their emergencies. Children separated from their parents during the humanitarian emergencies cannot be assumed to be orphans, and every opportunity should be used for reunification of the families. The actions of the President of the Russian Federation legalizing the abduction of the Ukrainian children, as stated in the President's decree, as he stated, was on humanitarian reasons, on grounds why he did it, why he adopted this decree, grossly violate the core international principles. And moreover, regardless of the fact if these children had relatives in Ukraine or parents left in Ukraine or not, it's also a marker of the genocide. A cultural genocide as it was defined by Raphael Lemkin in 1944, but also it's their genocide according to the convention of the genocidal convention adopted in their 1949. And I would like to cite more instances of such hostilities. They are less articulated, but are not less remarkable in this way. It's exploitation of the cultural property from the temporarily occupied regions of Ukraine. The journalists from both sides, they really cite all these instances of the exportation of this cultural property to the exhibits to the Russian Federation, and it can be, for example, the examples of the Scythian gold transformed from the Melitopol Museum of Local History, of paintings of Ivazovsky and Kuczynska from Art Museum of Mariupol. And similar cases we can also see in the Kherson region, who was occupied by the Russian Federation for almost 9 months. At the same time, Russian propagandists continued to promote the slogan of liberating the Ukrainian cultural heritage. Illegal character of this exportation can be easily proved by the fact that of the targeted arrests and interrogation of the museum staff and by the occupying power and forceful character of this confiscation, and also by the fact that, of course, Russian Federation with no doubt has control of these territories during the whole occupational period, because they even made their, their changes to their constitution, including these territories to their administrative parts. One of the Kherson occupying power officials made a statement that when the fighting will stop, the monuments would definitely return to Kherson. But meanwhile, he didn't specify if these exhibits will be returned to Kherson that by now has been already liberated by the Ukrainian army. I think it's not this case. And in practice, when the most valuable pieces of cultural property were transformed from Ukraine to consistently predominate in Russian museums, was a very widespread practice during the Soviet time. And today, this practice, practically it's coming back, but with one big difference, that it's appointed against the independent state. And it violates their first protocol of the Convention for the Protection of the Cultural Property in the event of the armed conflict. In broad sense, we can also understand it as a cultural genocide, as was never actually put in the genocidal convention, but I think we should rethink this reasoning. All such atrocities contain apparently contradictory but common features. They are demonstrative by their character, they contain direct appeal to the supreme spiritual values, and at the same time they tend to substitute existing legal concepts of criminal liability. Such tactics used by the Russian Federation are not accidental, and it's a part of the brutal informational war on Ukraine. It is aimed at undermining the international legal system and subsequently challenging the evaluation of the Russian war crimes. Similar informational tactics we already know, for example, in politics, especially after their Brexit procedures and also United States elections in 2016. And it has received the term post-truth. As defined in the Oxford Dictionary, the post-truth is something relating to the or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotions and personal beliefs. So far, the impact of the post-truth in the legal sphere is not well studied, and in my opinion, it's really underestimated. Outlining interrelation between post-truth and the law, I should like to stress that the law is based on the factual credibility, and it is strongly associated with promotion of the rule of law and social justice. It's very revealing. It's also maybe more for my Ukrainian colleagues, but with my background, I would like to stress it, that the notions of law, truth, rightful, justice, and even the state of things that reflect the reality have the common root and the verse of the same semantic sequence in Ukrainian language. And the same way that in politics, for example, that the concepts of the post-truth is trying to put the politics upside down, similarly, it attempts to make the law, to corrode it, and to make it non-law. Not spending much time into analyzing the post-truth concept, which is really well known to the experts in such field as philosophy, sociology, also especially the media experts, I would like to emphasize several concluding points deriving from the post-truth engagement in the context of the Russian-Ukrainian war. The post-truth narratives are used as a part of the Russian hybrid war against Ukraine and are aimed at shaping not only public opinion, abusing emotions and personal beliefs, but also to corrode the public sphere and criminal justice system. Post-truth texts differs from lies, manipulations, and other untruthful sayings. The post-truthers, they feel very much threatened by the truth and try to delegitimize it and subvert it, to disarm the threat the truth poses to them. In the case of the Russian war crimes, we witness the attempt to substitute existing legal concepts and nullifying the gravity of the war crimes, that in order to promote the very idea of imposing justice from the agenda. A broader perspective of the post-truth subsequently leads us to post-factuality, when objective facts are not relevant anymore and are substituted by the comforting lies. And I would like here to remember a very prominent German-American philosopher, Hannah that believed that emancipation of the thought from experience and reality is an indispensable feature of propaganda of the totalitarian movements. One of the main legacies, in my opinion, of Arendt is the concept of the banality of evil. Evil is perpetuated when immoral principles become normalized over the time by unthinking people. The post-truths reinforced by contemporary mass media, which often substitute for a lot of people the reality right now, reinforced by which practically is reinforced by this mass media that in our life, it becomes very much suitable for multiplication of the banal evil.